I'm Greg Price, and I manage the River Road Community Garden and Neighborhood Farm for Garden City Harvest. Garden City Harvest is a nonprofit that's been around in Missoula for 23 years. We operate 20 sites around Missoula, including neighborhood farms, community gardens, and school gardens. And through those 20 sites, we operate 4 different programs. The programs are Farm to School, Neighborhood Farms, Community Gardens, and we have a youth development program as well.
How many CSA shares? Own the property. Yes, so we own the property, and this was real special because it's the only piece of property that we own. Oh. And 5 years ago, the city of Missoula offered up some open space money. So in the 2006 open space bond, there was some language put in about community farms being eligible for open space money. So they were looking for a project like this, and it all just timed out perfectly. The landowner that used to own the land, he would always tell me this was his retirement. When we first started talking about it during like the housing boom, during the bubble, he wanted $1 million for 3.5 acres because of what the supposed development value was, which turns out was a joke because they would have to do all this infrastructure that now we've ended up having to do. So they paid for half of it, and they own a conservation easement, and then we paid for the other half of it. We own the deed. So as long as, it'll be farmed in theoretical perpetuity at this point.
Can you talk a little bit about the infrastructure?
Sure, yep. CSA shares.
I was just curious how many.
Yeah, so here we do about 80 CSA shares. And then the labor from my farm, there's 3 full-time people that work at this farm. And then we have volunteer for veggies. So people come by, businesses come work in groups. And then people can get paid in food shares that way. And then most of the staff takes food from here as well. But we're able to crank out, so the farm, so that's a community garden. So this is one of the co-sites basically. So I manage 55 community garden plots. And then between all these this field, the front field, these 2 fields, and then there's a little sliver over there too. It's just under 2 acres of cultivated ground on which we grow 40,000 pounds of food. So we can crank it out. And it's because we have volunteers on the ground, so we're putting 3 rows of broccoli instead of 2, and if you were mechanically cultivating, you couldn't do that. So you'd have to space things out differently, but because we have hands on the ground and it's mostly human labor, we can really tighten things up. And I've always called it kind of a hybrid between gardening and farming, like a farden,
Yeah.
Because we're growing a lot of food, but it's a smaller space, not backyard gardening, but it's not large-scale farming. It's not going to feed the world, but it works very well as a demonstration project, and it works really well for education and getting people, just more involved with your food system. I always like to say that what we do at Garden City Harvest is we offer opportunities for people to become more involved with their food. So you can buy a share, you can volunteer, you can have a community garden plot. You can, there's just all these different ways, that you can participate. And generally, what we see, like at the CSA here, I was just telling this guy who was here a little bit earlier. There's all these different models now that have cropped up. Most of which are really food delivery services, and that's fine. And that's a great thing. It's expanded local food. It's wonderful. I just wish they wouldn't call them CSAs, because it's not truly. CSAs were meant to bring people onto farms and to have producers and consumers come together so that you could build a relationship and everybody understands each other a little bit better. The farmer gets an idea of what consumers expect and want. Consumers get educated about what farmers deal with as far as like trying to pretty up your food all the time, even though it's has nothing to do often with the nutrition or the taste of the food. Half of our food in this country gets thrown out. And most of that is because of large-scale inefficiency or simply, visual imperfections that mean nothing to the food, itself, and is not a reflection. So those are great things that we're able to, to kind of put back into the food system that we hope that education over time helps consumers become a little bit more aware. But it's hard. It really is. It's a challenge, even at CSA. I'm constantly educating people as people go through the line, picking up food, and just dealing with it on that level. But what's great about our CSAs, we're still in that tradition of people coming here. That's how we're playing ourselves up, kind of the antidote to the frenzied, caffeinated society. Come here, chill out for a few minutes, take your time, let your kids weigh out some food. I don't there's no boxes. I don't use rubber bands. Everything's in their boxes. It's all cleaned up. It's on a board. You have to go through. I have scales. You have to weigh your own carrots. You have to pick out your own kale leaves. You have to do, you have to scoop your own salad mix, all that kind of stuff. It's not just swoop in and get out. But I have the highest return rate, organizationally. We all do it that way to some form or another. But I've been the most stubbornly resistant to making it any more convenient, and it works. And if it doesn't, there's so many choices out there now. You can have a box dropped at your neighbor's garage or where you work or wherever, if that's the kind of model you want. So there's lots of choices for the local food, and I think that's great. I just wish they'd call them delivery services, not CSAs. It's like the Western Montana Growers Co-op is wonderful, but you don't know where any of that food's coming from. You get your CSA box, it could come from 10 different farms, which is all good. It's local, but it's not the heart of what CSAs were meant to be as far as bringing more intimacy between consumers and producers, and thereby creating a little more understanding, and hopefully that translates into the marketplace as well. Because the other element of that is also talking to people about the idea of cheap food, and that, of course, cheap food is subsidized food that the government's helping to pay for, and that means usually somebody on the other end of that is getting neglected or abused. In this case, it's workers, it's the environment, and so forth. And so we talk a lot about that as well with folks, because everybody is addicted to things like Costco, and it's cheap, and that's all great, but and they're one of the better corporations out there as far as those kinds of things go. But it's a whole different thing as far as understanding what it takes to produce food. When I go through this with like the kids, it's made me more aware of it, because I'm talking about it on such an elemental level with kids. Like, we'll talk about something like wheat, and we'll be like, all right, how many steps does it take to make wheat into food? You got to plant the seeds, you got to harvest the seeds, you got to transport the seeds, you got to smash them up, and now you still don't have food. Now you got to mix it together with a bunch of other stuff, and then it ends up being food that's okay. It's not the best thing. It's okay, And then if in wheat's case, if you take the germ and the bran off, then it essentially becomes almost worthless food. And so it's interesting to think those things through on a real elemental level. And then I always tell them, and they're just looking at me. I'm like, think of all the energy it takes. You're driving this stuff around. It's going on a train, and people are driving around in big combines, and then you end up with food that's just okay. We're in the 100-year-old irrigation ditch. And it's still priced like it's 100 years ago. We paid, what is it? It's $35 an acre. So we pay like 120 bucks for all the water we want out of the irrigation ditch. And then we also have a well for like drinking water and such. And the well services the community garden, actually. And then I have 2 pumps in the irrigation ditches that we run hand lines off of for the farm, for the most part.
So that's a water right that you have?
That's a water right that we had. And because hardly anyone uses the ditches for agriculture anymore, it's not an issue. There's very few people using it for agriculture. And so anytime there's shortages, or if they have to do something, the ditch rider's really good. I have a gate that I can block up to make sure that I get water. And there's, I think, maybe 5 other agricultural users on the whole line. Benson's uses a little bit over there for some corn, some cows over there. It actually crosses Reserve Street, and there's a few more small operations on the other side of Reserve Street off of River Road. But for the most part, that's it. And then people, if you don't opt out of the ditch, then people water their lawns with it and stuff. But yeah, that creates other problems. We're lucky. We're one of the first users. The ditch comes in off the river just below Bernice's. There's a big elbow gate there, and then it runs through the old mill property, and then it divides out just when it crosses Russell Street here. And so we're one of the first users on it.
So you don't worry about runoff from people's lawns or...
Right, exactly.
Your water.
Fortunately, it goes to the old mill site. So, we've tested it, and it's fine. It doesn't have any kind of alarming rates of any types of heavy metals or anything like that. But that was a 30 or whatever, 20-acre mill site for however many years. But it's all being remediated now. But we know the soil's not great over there. The soil's been tested. When they did some of the development there, we talked with them about doing community gardens and stuff, but we were like, no, we're not touching that. It would be too much.
So I've heard from a lot of small farmers that becoming certified organic is just like this huge hurdle than just the
Right.
stickers. So can you explain why you guys haven't sold it?
So our sales are direct sales, so we don't need the label basically. That's like the short answer. And you know, for those of us who were around when all the certification was coming around, we also still kind of have a little sore spot stuck in our craw because there were already certifying agencies all over the country, and the FDA or the USDA, they wanted to consolidate it all, and their whole justification was that so there would be one consistent system that then consumers would know. Well, that's a joke because consumers have no idea mostly what organic means. The first answer everybody gives is no chemicals, which is not true. I could be certified organic and I could bomb this place with pyrethrin all summer long if I wanted, and there wouldn't be an insect alive, but I could be certified organic because I'm using an organically certified chemical. And that's in fact what happens on larger industrial organic farms that are still monocropping and using things like pyrethrin and regular spraying regimens for pesticides. So we just don't need the label, basically. People can come here, you can work here, you can go in my closets and you can see all the chemicals that I use, which is, I've got one shelf with 3 bottles on it that I hardly ever use. I end up taking most of them to Has Waste days because I don't use most of it. But occasionally we'll spray a tiny bit of pyrethrin, spot spray things like flea beetles when we put tomatoes in. Otherwise, we almost spray nothing. A little bit of copper solution here and there. So we abide by organic rules as far as that goes. And what I like to tell people about organics is that there's a rule book that says what it's not, but nobody seems to know what it is. But if previous to conventional farming, you know, in the 1930s, 40s, you know, civilization's based on agriculture, roughly 10,000 years old, so 9,920 years, we were doing it one way. Didn't have to have a differentiating label saying organic or conventional. So what it's always been is crop rotations, polyculture, soil amendments from nature, basically, you know, compost and things like that. You do those things, most of the rest of it takes care of itself, which is what I had learned in my early days. I would want to react quickly. You know, I'd see a flea beetle, I'm like, where's the spray bottle? You know, I'm gonna go get that flea beetle. And then I started to realize, almost by accident, that like, oh yeah, well then there's a predatory insect that hatches behind that. And if I just chill out for 10 days, it'll probably take care of itself. And as a matter of fact, that's exactly what happens. And at this point, I feel like, you know, my job is to set the table, and if I do that correctly and I take care of the foundation, which is the soil, everything that comes after that is gonna work pretty well. And you can do that on a small scale, you can do it on 10,000 acres, it doesn't matter. It's a little ecosystem that you're setting up, you know, and it's based on biodiversity, which creates resilience, which is how things bounce back from stress. And so most times, you know, this was like a perfect year this year. Last year, so we had almost identical weather years, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what happened. You know, so 2 years in a row we had wet winters into wet spring, into record dry spells. So 2 years in a row we broke July's rainfall record. Last year was 0.02. That was a record. This year was 0. That broke the previous year's record. Last year we went 46 days without rain in the summer. This year we went 47 days without rain in the summer. So identical years. Well, last year I had my first major crop failure that I've ever experienced. That wasn't due to some human error. And that was, we had fall carrots, should have amounted to about 1,500 pounds. But very early on, they got this disease called Astor's yellow, which is very common in carrots around here. Leafhoppers carry it, and leafhoppers are very common. There's a couple different types. And so every year we have leafhoppers, every year we have a little bit of Astor's yellow, but I never saw it get out of control like that. And one of two things I think happened: either the disease was more amped up, or I think maybe leaning more towards they just got on the carrots earlier, because my carrot tops were this big and they look, you know, they all turn yellow and gold, and then the carrots get ruined. This year I have carrots behind us here that we're still digging, but as you can see a few gold tops in there, but very little Astor's yellow, and we're turning up beautiful carrots this year. You know, they're dark orange and really good, and so crazy stuff like that, you know, that's just a blip as far as I'm concerned. I didn't overreact to it. I hedged my bet, planted 2 other varieties to make sure that we're a little more resistant. The ones that got hit the hardest are ones that we've been saving seed for. We do the Scarlet Nance, you know, the old OP French variety of carrots that don't look so pretty but taste great. So, and then we save a bunch of other seeds too. So anything else about kind of?
So you said you save seeds, but isn't that like a multi-year process?
For carrots, it is, yes. So, but with carrot seed lasts really well for 5 years. And I've always said the best carrot seed is 2 or 3 years old because then you get less germination, meaning you don't have to thin so much. And when you're doing 150-foot long rows, times 4, it's a lot of thinning. Although I've gotten very fast at thinning. But yeah, so we grow carrot seed about every 3 years. We do carrot seed. And then I've been doing some parsnip seed. All of our tomato varieties are our seed. We do black beans, pinto beans, that's our seed. We do dragon sung beans that are our seeds. All of our hot peppers are our seeds. And then we're able to do all that outdoors. I have no hoop houses, none of that stuff. We just use Rime as season extending. So,
What do you do with your electricity from your solar panels? So you're running everything here?
Yes. So So this is all very new. So we purchased land 5 years ago, and then last year we just finished building all these guys. You guys want to take a walk over there, and we can talk a little bit more about the buildings and kind of what went into some of that stuff. Buildings behind us. So we call this the shed quarters. It's kind of a joke that it's a shed, but it's a very large shed. But it houses 3 different programs, tools. I'll park the tractor in here this winter, and we have a little wood shop that's on the north end there. Still getting organized in there and such, but we run our community gardens, and our school gardens folks have all their tools and stuff in here. And that's basically just a storage spot. Remember, solar panels, which the idea is that they should be able to supply enough power for the whole building site during the summertime. We won't know that for sure until we see the information that comes, the audit basically after a year. So we'll get to see the full kind of picture of how much energy it produced, how much energy we used, and how much credit that you get to kind of click back in to the grid. So we don't know exactly at this point, but given the size of them and talking to the solar experts, it seems that it's going to easily power what we need to power in the summertime.
You're trusting the engineering?
Yeah, that's right. We're trusting the engineering, exactly, as we did with all this stuff, which we found some problems. We have to put snow guards now up on this building because we had snow slides that would have killed somebody if they were underneath one of them last year. And we thought it was steep enough that it wasn't going to hold snow the way it did, but again, with our winters kind of fluctuating warm, cold, you get some weird layering sometimes and it's stuck. And then we had what looked like a glacier below there well into April this year. And so we're putting snow guards up on those guys. But all the wood is from, local mills. We use some wood in our office from the old farmhouse that actually used to be here. They're super tight buildings, which I'm not always convinced is the best thing, but because then you have to put a $10,000 air exchanger in there to move air around because it's so darn tight. I won't go off on that, but I think that sometimes we overplay the idea of what we consider to be sustainable, as far as some of the building materials and things like that. So let's move inside so that we can get out of the rain here. So this is our drying room, and this is a really cool addition to when we put these buildings in. We wanted this building to be multi-dimensional as far as its uses, and it really is. So we've got this drying room up here, which is actually the mechanical room for the building, but it was designed by the engineers to wrap around the outside, free up the inside space for us to use as a drying room. This is our maiden voyage up here, so we're still kind of figuring out some of the stuff. We've got a big exhaust fan that we run that pulls all the humidity out for the most part. We've got a bunch of fans running in here, drying stuff. We had about 8,000 or 9,000 pounds of onions hung. Half of them are down now, you can see. The rest of them are still curing off. We also cured off squash. We had a couple thousand pounds of squash up here. We had all of our garlic up here as well. It worked really well, so I'm really psyched about it. We just built that frame. That's old top rail from the chain link fence that I threw up there and just clamped down the wood to hang from. And then we just built these last year, these drying racks, which I've always dreamed about, having drying racks.
Is that crank outside, that lift?
And then the crank outside, there's a lift. So that is it's for roofing equipment. It's meant to bring roofing equipment up onto a roof. I was having trouble convincing the engineers that I wanted a hoist built into the building. They didn't want to do it though, and for some reason. And then we got some pushback about insurance, but I'm thinking, boy, if they saw what we were doing now, I don't know how what they think about that. But so now we're using this hoist. It's a hand crank hoist. It can handle 400 pounds. And we can put big boxes on it. You crank it up to the top. The ladder comes right in at this door.
What was the value of putting it on the second floor?
Good question. Because so underneath us is the caretaker's apartment. And when we did all the shifting around and trying to figure out what was the best space for that, it turned out that was better left on the ground floor, so we ended up here. And then the front of the building, which I'll show you, is a community room and a commercial kitchen. So, and like I said, that lift comes all the way up to the top here. And then there's a bar that flips down, and we have another bar that attaches and goes down to this little table here. So, piece of wood's there. We got about 4 or 5 boxes. It comes all the way up to the top here. It slides right off. Boom. You unload the onions. Yeah, getting them out of here is a different story. I've been joking that I want to come up with, I've seen like the old, yeah, exactly, like a swimming pool slide, because they come in like panels, and I'm like, oh, I can shoot them right into the back of the truck. Because when you do good food store deliveries, it's like 700 pounds of onions at a time. These are in 40-pound bags. I'm usually doing the deliveries by myself, so it's a lot of trips up and down the stairs with heavy onions, but it's okay. It's like once or twice a week. It's not huge.
Cheaper than going to the gym.
Yes, cheaper than going to the gym, exactly. Yeah.
So did you build all of this with a grant, or what was your income?
This was all direct donation.
Wow.
Yeah, we had. Again, we really got to literally cash in on the equity that we built in the community, over the last 22 years. Because we raised $2.5 million for this project, really within a year for the most part. There was a little bit of it that came after that, but I mean, we had one person give $500,000, another person give $400,000,
Wow.
250,000 gifts, several $100,000 gifts.
Wow.
So half of it was paid for by like 3 people. Yeah, it was amazing, and we were blown away too. That was not our expectation. It was a 3-year-long campaign. We had a loan guaranteed through the bank, so we needed cash flow money to pay our bills, and we've only had to use a tiny bit of that loan. Like in our whole capital campaign, I think we had like it was almost $90,000 set aside for paying interest on that loan, and we've only paid like $8,000.
Wow.
And we've only had to take it out for a very short period of time. Then we can pay it off right away and be done with it. So it worked out better than we thought.
All 4 farms have infrastructure like this?
No, they don't, because this is the only site we own.
I gotcha.
So we're on
Okay.
a long-term lease at the Peas Farm
Gotcha.
up on the school property, and we approached that totally differently. Josh was basically like, we're just going to build stuff up here and fight about it later. And so once it existed, it put the school district in a very tricky position to try to like sell that land off, which we kind of went through a couple years ago. There was a big public process about all that, and at the end of the day, the Peas Farm is on like a 99-year lease now that we pay almost nothing for. Basically, the city subleases it. It's weird. They sublease it, and we sublease it from them. But we're under some weird rules up there with them too. And then our other farms, the other one, the Orchard Gardens one, is with Homeward, and he has some nice infrastructure over there as well, because that was built in as part of the original development. So he has kind of a barn that's half barn, half community center that's used by the residents there. The youth farm is actually on a youth home property, so they have an old barn as well, not as nice as this, and there are some infrastructure upgrades that are needed at our other sites, and that's what we're turning some of our attention towards now, especially up at the Peas Farm. That's a straw bale barn that was built by the community almost 20 years ago, so it needs some upgrades now and things like that.
So what are the factors that you think have led to the success of building that level of support in Missoula? I mean, I know you've been around a while, 22 years or so, but that's incredible to have that level of community support.
It is, yeah.
Can you speak to that at all as far as?
I think by and large, it's the people that are in our community. I think we're very fortunate to have a food-interested, food-savvy community. There was a core of that, when Garden City Harvest started. They had long-standing farmers markets. There were a few community gardens, but then it just multiplied exponentially. Community-wide, we have over 300 plots available, and there's 100 people on the waiting list.
Wow.
And we have 2 new gardens on the way. So I think and you know, more than just the community that was here, the people that have continued to build this community and move here from other places, like myself, have those interests when they come here. People want to slow down a little bit. People want to be part of a local community. I mean, it's insane how much local food is available now in such a small valley, really.
Yes.
Think about Bitterroot, you know, and Missoula. It's incredible. It really is. I mean, I haven't bought a vegetable in 17 years just for my own farming and my ability. You know, I can can and freeze and root store stuff. And so there's all kinds of people that are into that now. If you go to the farmer's market at the end of the year, you know, like the competition for our CSA shares has gone way up. We don't sell them all now. Whereas it used to be, they were all gone by April. We're still trying to get people signed up in June now. And that's part of the success of the greater community, which we are absolutely bought into. You know, that's part of what we want to see as an outcome from education and things that we were talking about before. You know. So I just think that's kind of the story of it. Once local food got elevated, you know, on the national scene, there wasn't a food program at the university when we first started. The peas farm was in and out of the university in the first 10 years. It was in, then it was out, and then Josh had to run it through continuing ed, which meant it wasn't part of your usual semester payments. You had to pay above and beyond that. And once they saw that people were still filling the class like that, and then Omnivore's Dilemma rolled out, and then all of a sudden they couldn't get him back fast enough into EVST. Neva Hassanen was hired at the university as the food professor, basically, and it just took off. And now it is what keeps environmental studies afloat. It is by far the biggest attractant in environmental studies at the university on the graduate level. Those classes fill up. There's 30 to 40 students on the shoulder seasons and 15 to 20 students during the summer that take a 6-credit class that they work, 4 hours a day at. So yeah, I just think it's been part of the evolution of the overall food scene, and that we're in a really sweet spot here in Missoula that attracts those kind of people.
I have a question about how you participate in community planning. I'm just thinking of the road out there. And
Sure.
I know one of the challenges of getting here is traffic.
Yes.
And so, will there be bicycle paths? Or
Yes.
Do you have some? Oh.
So there will be a bicycle. So there used to be there was a path that wasn't an official path that went under Russell Street for years.
Okay.
You just had to duck so that the bridge didn't take your head off when you went underneath there. But they will be putting an official bike path underneath there. And then you'll also have the tunnel that goes underneath Russell Street, just on the other side of Wyoming now. There'll be an underground passageway for bicycles and pedestrians, making it easier. Car traffic will be a little trickier because a light will go in at Wyoming Street. You'll only be able to go right in and out of River Road out here. You won't be able to make left-hand turns, which you really couldn't anyway. They're just formalizing what has already been happening for the last 20 years that I've seen, So yeah, but that's always been an issue that we've heard plenty about as far as the traffic getting in and out of here.
So did you get involved with the?
We were involved with it, yeah. Well, originally they had all kinds of crazy stuff. If you went and saw, because they were desperately trying to figure out another road to pass through between River Road and 3rd Street. And so at one point we went to a meeting and it was right through our farm. And it's so funny because it's just like, this was after we had bought the place and there was a conservation easement on it that the city owned. And we're like, I think you're going to be doing that anymore, And then they want to do it through the trailer court, but I think it's just too complicated because there's too much private property. People were smart in the non-planning development in this neighborhood. They all cul-de-sac themselves off, and there's dead-end streets everywhere in this neighborhood. It's crazy. You could drive around like a maze and try to figure out how to get out of here. You got in the middle of it, off of like Wyoming or Idaho Street. You'd be like, where am I going? Dead ends everywhere. But they're quiet little streets. Don't have a lot of traffic in them. So, all right, let's move downstairs. Take a look at our community space. Bad neighborhood politics if we had a bunch of sheep making noise and goats getting into people's yards and eating everything. But we've had lots of people ask about it. But I like the chickens are good. They're fun to have around. They're kid-friendly for the most part, and except for Bobby, the little rooster who can do the laundry. So the question was, how is the neighborhood kind of participating in the site and the farm? And that's really cool because it's changed quite a bit over the years. I was on this site for 14 years, and there was a house attached to it, and there was renters there, and they never participated. So it's just kind of an example. And now we have neighbors all around us who are participating. We have people from the trailer court who have rented plots here. We have neighbors who have helped me with chicken care and who come over. We do Wednesday lunches here where the farm crew cooks for all the admin folks. Just kind of like a little bonding type of thing that we do. And so we invited some of the neighbors over for that. Because it's become more high visibility with the new buildings, we've had more neighbors, but people are coming into the neighborhood as well who want to be closer to the garden. The people that own the 2 houses behind us both told me that they bought those houses because they were adjacent to the farm. One gal said she had grown up in a rural area and it just reminded her a little bit of that, being in the middle of the city. So we've definitely seen it increase quite a bit over the last 5 years in particular. As people are moving into the neighborhood. We just had some really good friends and longtime volunteers bought a house just down the road. So it's all, yeah. And as an organization, when we do, for community gardens, it's a lottery system. So if you don't already have a plot, then you put a piece of paper in a hat, basically you draw them out. But we try to place people within, a mile or so, 2 miles of where they live. Doesn't always work out that way. And we've identified weak spots around Missoula where we can put in new gardens, which is what we're doing right now. Like we're putting in a garden right by the mall. The city's putting in a park there, and we're putting in a garden right next to that. It's a very congested, kind of crazy area, mixed industrial housing. The mall's right there. It's at a very busy intersection of Johnson and South Avenue. So that's a cool little project. We knew it was a weak spot, and we'll see what happens, right? Because community gardens, you need people that are interested in it. We have lots of vertical living in Missoula, so that's one of the kind of underpinnings of it all is there a need? And there is a need because there's more and more vertical living happening in Missoula, and so that's, I think, in part what's also driven some of the interest in community gardens as well. So you have more people moving here, and basically, if you own a house in Missoula, it's like sitting in a gold mine at this point, especially in an old neighborhood. Because there are not going to be more of them.
What kind of commitments do you ask from people to get a community plot? Do they have to commit to certain?
They sign a contract. Yep. They pay $40 for the plot. Yes.
To get a community.
Yes. To get a community plot, first you have to be selected in the lottery. Then there's a contract that you fill out that states basic rules, and expectations. It's $40 for a plot, which I'm advocating for a higher cost because it really gives people quite a bit. So with that $40 and a $20 deposit that you get back if you clean up your garden at the end of the year, but you get tools, land, water, advice, sometimes workshops and things like that as well. So you get quite a bit. And I kind of feel like we've gone beyond. Early on, most of the people we were serving were kind of low to mid-income folks, and that's changed a little bit over time. And so we're reevaluating some of that right now. Probably going to go to like a sliding scale of some sort, so that we can still honor, our social justice mission in that, but also make a little more money because it's the program that's the hardest one to fund, really. So you get a 15 by 15 plot, so it's 225 square feet. And then the water systems are different at all the different gardens. Like I have central hoses, like there's basically one hose outlet for every 4 or 5 plots that people just have to share. And then we have some where there's a hose at every plot or a spigot at every plot. And then there's some that are on timers, which I've never really understood that exactly. I'm sure people like it because they don't have to go out to their plots, but if you're a real savvy gardener, you would never want your garden to go on a timer because it just doesn't work that way. You don't need the same amount of water day in and day out all year long for different plants. So, And so this is our community room. As I was saying, this is our multifaceted building. So we got the caretaker quarters, a little 350 square foot apartment on the other side of the commercial kitchen wall here. We got our storage upstairs. And then this is our community space that we're renting out to folks for meetings, for events, whatever. And then we have the commercial kitchen that's not certified commercial yet. We're still waiting. We have to hook up to city water next year. That was part of the whole infrastructure deal that I was talking about as far as like what would have had to happen if you were going to develop here. it's kind of this last minute thing came in, the city, not the, well, the fire department came in and kind of kicked us in the shins at the last minute. The whole thing was all planned. We already had another well planned to service the building that was going to be a public drinking water type of well, which requires some different infrastructure in the well itself. And then they were like, oh no, like, you got to have a fire hydrant there. And to have a fire hydrant, you have to have an incredible amount of cubic feet of water per second or per minute, which you couldn't accomplish with a well here. It wouldn't be cost effective. So we've been trying to figure out how to pay for all that, and we think it's all figured out now, and we're first in line in the spring to get hooked up with all this road work they did. The first thing they did was they extended the water line to the corner here of River Road, because it was kind of crazy. So they were holding our project hostage basically for the fire hydrant, because there's nobody's on water anywhere in this corner of the street here. So the whole trailer court, everybody over here, they're all in wells, and they have been for a long time. The nearest water, I think it's 1,200 feet away, and it is extraordinarily expensive to dig up the road and to put new water. It was going to cost us, it was like $350,000 or something. So then they were like, well, we need to service over here anyway. So the city paid to bring the water from where it was on Idaho Street to the corner of River Road, and then we've been working with MRA to bring it the rest of the way here, and then we're going to incur some costs with all that too. But right now we're first in line as of April. Then we'll have our kitchen will be officially certified, which all that really means is then we can charge money for people who are for cooking. Like if we had an event here, we couldn't technically cook the food here right now and charge money for it. I can invite you all over here and cook food in here, and that's fine. It's just like your own kitchen, but you can't charge money for it. That makes it a commercial endeavor, and so we're not going to be renting it out to like food trucks or prep people. We don't want people in and out here all hours. We have somebody living on site, so that would be a very good deal. And so mostly at this point it's been used for various types of meetings and gatherings and such. And then what we're going to use it for, what we're really excited about, and the main purpose of the kitchen is for us to be able to extend our youth programs into the wintertime, so that they can get some cooking and other types of work experience, and that we can maintain a relationship with some of those kids. The kids in those programs tend to be living in unstable situations, having some trouble one way or another, and so the more time that we can get with them and kind of exemplify different ways of being in the world and give them some skills and some education around some of that stuff, the better off it seems that they are. I've seen all kinds of kids go through those programs, and they're so close, and then they're 18 years old, and the state just dumps them right back on the street, and if they go right back to where they came from, then the same old stuff ends up recurring, for them. They get into the same, what I call the uncomfortable comfort zone. It's what you're familiar with, not always the best thing for you, but we tend to gravitate back towards those situations. Those kids that we've been able to hang on to a little bit longer have had much better success. They're able to still be like, you know what? I love my family, but maybe I shouldn't be there all the time. Maybe there's some other things in the world. And that's really the cool part of that program. Like those kids work up at the Peas Farm, they work with other people out at the youth farm, and they interface with people they wouldn't otherwise interface with. And so they hear things, they learn about new perspectives in the world, things they've never heard of, and it often really opens up opportunities for them. And therapy's all great, but I think the real magic is in just interfacing with all kinds of people that they wouldn't normally get to interact with. So it's a really cool dynamic. So we hope to, we don't hope to, we have plans to. We're working on our strategic plan right now for the next 5 years, and one of the main things is to have those kids doing some of that stuff. And so this year we're going to pilot it. They're going to do 2 community meals here that we won't charge for. They'll practice one on the staff, and then we're going to invite people from the school district, teachers that they're involved with, people from the youth homes, other people that they are interacting with in different agencies and such, and have them come here, and the kids will make a big meal for those guys. And then we hope in the future that we can charge money for that, and that we get a little bit of a kind of a small scale culinary training going with those kids. And we're going to do canning classes. We want to be able to teach people how to extend seasonal stuff, canning, freezing, all those kinds of season extenders. Because one of the things that you notice running a CSA, constantly interacting with people who are new to the food scene is one of the biggest deficits in our food world is people don't know how to cook anymore. and they don't know what to do with a lot of different types of food. And so there's a huge educational element that we know that we've been missing out on for years. You can hand people recipes and you can talk to them, and that's one thing, but people really, I think, like the hands-on experience. I hope to make, as part of our CSA in the future, to be able to, like, each week do just a small taste test of something that's kind of unusual or different. I can cook it up here in the kitchen, and we do our CSA right outside this door. And so I hope to be able to offer that in the future. And again, to further kind of set our CSA apart from what others are doing, to give it an extra little twist. But really, it's going to be, we're really hoping that it becomes an education center for cooking classes and for expanding people's ability to preserve food and anything along those lines. We just put a solar dehydrator in out back, so we'll give that a run next year. Yeah. Any other questions?
So with the well, just going back to that for a minute, is that a Missoula County regulation?
City.
The city says you cannot have a commercial kitchen on a well, even if the tests are all.
No, you could have. We could have put a public water well in, but because of the fire hydrant requirement, we could not have supplied the fire hydrant with the kind of water that it needs.
Oh, and a commercial kitchen.
Yeah, it needs like 20,000 CFS or something crazy like that to have enough pressure. Yeah, and it was kind of funny because I was like, what do they think, we're opening a Kentucky Fried Chicken or something here? It's like,
Interesting.
So we have to have all this, basically you have to set it up like you're going to run a restaurant. We have these huge, they're underneath the ground over here, there's these huge pits for grease that have to be, and then there's clean out valves and everything. So it's kind of crazy. So it's set up like that, and then the commercial kitchen, and it's all commercial equipment and everything. We have convection ovens, and it's all up to standard. So I'm sure the health department will find something to bother us about, because that's kind of what they do. I used to run restaurants, so I have a lot of firsthand experience with dealing with the health department. Yeah.
Was this building also funded by grant donations?
It was, yeah. So the admin building, this building, as well as the shed quarters are all brand new. Yeah. And then the one shed that we passed, the red shed we just built this year, a new community garden shed. We tore down an old one and rebuilt that. And that was fun because it was a little crazy, there was all this construction going on, and Garden City Harvest has always been a very like we do it ourselves kind of thing. So it was a bit of a weird experience to see Knife River out here and like these big construction companies. So it felt really good to build a hand-built shed. This 3 days, 3 of us built this shed, and I was like, yes, okay, yes, we still are who we are. And then the big question for me over the years has been, how are you going to handle all this, these buildings and all these people, and it's going to all change, and hardly anybody even knew we were here. It was just a house out front, and you had to actually stop to see that there was a farm here. And now it's like, woo, right out in front. And like I said, we have neighbors coming by going, I had no idea. And it's like, well, we've been here for a long time. But really what's happened is it couldn't have worked out any better. All the new spaces are working out really well, and everything from the solar panels back is exactly the same on the farm. The farm has maintained the same vibe. There's a few other people roaming around at times because admin folks are doing tours, or it's great for them because now our admin is actually on one of our sites, so there's not so much of a divide between like what we do on the ground and what the administration is doing. They can see the comings and goings of the farm every single day. They can come out and walk around and be a part of it, and I think all that is just great for team cohesion, but it's also great for fundraising because they have a more intimate way to speak about what we do now and the farm. It's not as theoretical for them. It's not just a quick visit. They see it every single day. There's 400 or so people flowing through this space throughout the year when you add up all the people in the community garden, CSA folks, volunteers, and now multiply that out with having more admin staff here and more visits for fundraising. You're probably up to 500-600 people flowing through here during the year. So, anything else I can ask or I can answer for you? Cool. Well, unless you guys have any other questions, that's probably a wrap on what I have to tell you about. Thank you very much. I love talking about all this stuff. Thanks for all the good questions, too. So I want to thank AERO for coming today. It's always a pleasure to talk in front of people who are so interested in the local and organic food systems. And we can be reached at gardencityharvest.org, or my personal email is gardengrizz
@hotmail.com, and I can also be reached at 406-240-3848.